The world is changing around her. In the small hours before dawn, she smooths the fabric of a dress she has worn through 3 summers, her fingers tracing a hem she once thought would never fray. Outside, men she knows are boarding trains for a war that will redraw maps and reorder daily life. Inside, the rules of beauty and dress are being rewritten to fit ration books, factory shifts, and the quiet economy of courage. Think of 1939 as a starting silhouette. The late 1930s shape tightened, but now with purpose. Shoulders are broader, often padded. Jackets are sharply tailored. Waists are defined sometimes with corsetry, sometimes with belts and skirts sit at or slightly below the knee in practical aligns. Fabrics still show, prints and florals when they can, but cuts grow economical and decisive. Fashion borrows military lines without shedding femininity. A structured jacket, a sensible skirt, a hint of hourglass beneath the working clothes of the ERA. Then rationing arrives and the closet changes its rules. In Britain, clothing rationing begins in 1941. Coupons become as necessary as money when buying a new garment. What was once bought for taste is now bought by coupon value. Patterns are read for their economy, fewer panels, narrower hems, fewer buttons, and less trim. Seams are placed to save yardage and labor. Trimmings that once declared personality, lavish lace, broad flounces, layered ornament, begin to disappear. The vocabulary of fashion turns to restraint. Less yardage, simpler lines, smarter cuts, and because cloth is scarce, cut becomes the instrument of style. A well-placed dart, a clever collar, a single pleat can make a humble dress read as elegant. The state itself helps shape that new grammar. In Britain, the utility clothing scheme known as CC41, after the Central Council regulations, standardizes production so quality survives even under constraint. A CC41 mark promises fair pricing, durable construction, regulated heel heights, and measured fabric usage. Designers are sometimes asked to reinterpret regulations, proving that elegance can live inside a ration book. The message is not that taste must end. It is that taste must be translated into civic, thrift, and practical beauty. Make Do and Mend becomes a cultural program as much as a practical necessity, from leaflets to instructional films and women's magazines. The campaign teaches mending, patching, rehemming, and a faded dress is not trash, but raw material. Sleeves are shortened to make a new blouse. A coat is relined and reborn. Buttons are saved and reused. The home becomes a small workshop of invention. Needlework is recast as national service. The seamstress's skill is patriotism. Creativity blossoms in thrift. A contrasting collar, a decorative patch, a ribbon used sparingly, small touches that turn repair into expression. Workwear asserts itself as a new daily uniform. With men at the front, women move into factories, shipyards, transport services, and farms. Practical clothes follow: sturdy blouses, tucked and belted, high-waisted trousers or dungarees, coveralls for the heavy jobs. The iconography that emerges is both literal and symbolic. Rosie the Riveter in the United States, the Land Girls in Britain, the women of the WACs, WRENs, and WAAFs. Images of sleeves rolled, hair tied, hands steady at machines. Even as women adopt traditionally masculine items for work, they often retain small traces of femininity. A fitted blouse under a boiler suit, a scarf at the neck, a painted lip at break time. Utility is not the erasure of style. It becomes a new form of it. Hair becomes a negotiation between safety and identity. Long hair loose at the back is a hazard around gears and flame, so practical needs shape fashionable solutions. Victory rolls, the voluminous rolls of hair tucked at the sides or on top, solve both problems. They keep hair secure on the factory floor and can be dressed up for an evening out. Pin curls, pompadours, rolled bangs and tight, neat buns tuck hair away beneath scarves and snoods, but also create a controlled, iconic femininity. Headscarves themselves are multifunctional. protective in day and stylish when tied just so at night. The hairdo signals competence and care, tidy for work, deliberate for the street, glamorous for letters and photographs. Makeup becomes a compact act of defiance and morale. Cosmetics are never purely frivolous in wartime. They are tiny portable affirmations of self. Lipstick, especially a red or deep rose, survives because it consumes little material yet signals resilience. Authorities and advertisers pitch bright lips as morale boosters. Photographs of nurses, factory workers, and servicewomen often show a neat lip as a punctuation of steadiness. Resourcefulness shows up in beauty routines. Empty lipstick tubes are scraped and the residues remelted. Creams are ration stretched, and home formulas circulate by word of mouth. Eyebrows are groomed into clear arches. A touch of rouge or powdered chic can lift a face under blackout gloom. Makeup, in wartime, is a small public performance of continuity. Stockings speak loudly in their absence. Before the war, nylons were a relatively new luxury. Once war production needed raw materials, hosiery became scarce. Silk and nylon were redirected to parachutes and technical uses. Women improvised. Pencil seams were drawn down the back of the calf to mimic the line of a stocking. Leg makeup smoothed the look of bare legs, and in some towns, services would paint heels and seams onto calves for a finished appearance. The shortage of something as ordinary as hosiery becomes a visible sign of sacrifice, and later, the return of nylons after the war is met with almost feverish demand, proof of how ordinary goods become charged with emotion. Shoes and hats adjust to a new practical aesthetic. Heels are lower and sturdier, made to be resoled and repaired. Soles are built with maintenance in mind. Hats shrink in scale, but not in importance. Small, tilted hats, turbans, snoods, and snug cloches are convenient under blackout conditions and easy to make. Gloves are often saved for travel or formal occasions rather than daily dress. Accessories become economical choices with symbolic weight. A brooch pinned to a plain coat, a silk scarf saved for an evening dance, a single strand of imitation pearls kept for company. These modest items carry a disproportionate share of personal style. Regional differences matter, but do not overturn the broad trends. In Britain, official schemes and the realities of air raid shape dress in ways different from the American home front, where mass production and different rationing patterns create other pressures. In the United States, nylon shortages and leather restrictions affect wardrobes differently than the coupon system does in Britain. In occupied Europe and other theaters, scarcity and regulation can be harsher, prompting even more improvisation or a turn to the black market where fabric and trimmings trade at a premium. Yet across nations, the core negotiation is the same: public necessity versus private identity, state regulation versus domestic invention. Uniforms expand beyond factory wear. Women in auxiliary services wear uniforms that combined discipline with distinctive tailoring, the WRNS and WREN. The Women's Auxiliary Air Force and the American Waves and WACs each develop service dress that is practical and often tailored to fit. Nurses, ambulance drivers, and munitions workers adopt versions of practicality that mark role and status. Sensible shoes, practical coats, a tidy cap or beret. The military-style suit becomes a common civilian reference: structured shoulders, defined waistlines, and a rhetoric of competence that the civilian suit borrows and adapts. Even when women wear civilian clothes, the visual vocabulary of uniform, clean collars, sharp hems, sensible footwear has seeped into everyday life. Children's clothing and domestic wear change, too. Practicality rules for growing bodies, simpler cuts, hand-me-downs, and patched knees become normalized. At home, aprons multiply, not just to protect garments, but as a place to keep tools of thrift. Needles, a ration book tucked in a pocket, a scrap of fabric saved for mending. Domestic textiles, blackout curtains, tablecloths, spare curtains used as linings, are used and reused until they fray into stories. Household rituals shift. Ironing becomes both utility and ritual, a way to present steadiness in photographs and letters. Materials and technical shifts leave rayon, a silk substitute, becomes more common. Cotton and wool are carefully conserved. Metal fastenings and zips are sometimes replaced with buttons or toggles when metal is needed elsewhere. Shoe leather and rubber are rationed, encouraging inventive soles and the reuse of older footwear. Textile mills are retooled for military needs, but a steady stream of civilian fabrics still circulates, often altered, repurposed, and treasured. Communities invent new economies of fashion. Sewing circles, salvage clubs, and swap shops become social hubs. Women exchange patterns, trade buttons, organize repairs, and teach one another how to transform an old coat into a new ensemble. Department stores run refashioning services. Local tailors and repair shops extend the life of garments. Fashion magazines pivot to show how to make the most of scarce cloth. Shop windows offer fabrics for refashioning rather than frivolity. These practices make thrift visible and even celebratory. The social life of dress persists. Dances, canteens, cinemas, and community events continue. Women save small luxuries for those nights. In queues or air raid shelters, clothing becomes a language, an exchange of signals about who you are, what role you play, and what you intend to keep of pre-war life. Photographs sent to soldiers, ration card stamped skirts, a fresh collar ironed on a letter's Sunday, these are cultural texts. Clothing reassures. I am safe. I am well. I remember home. Material scarcity reshapes value. Items, once common, become treasured. A length of silk, a functioning heel, a well-stitched button are economic and emotional units. People trade and swap. Home tailoring services proliferate. Repair shops learn to reconstruct and reinforce. The life cycle of a garment extends. A dress passes through hands, is altered for different wearers, and becomes an archive of use. The gender politics of dress subtly shift. By necessity, women take on roles that change public expectations. Wearing trousers in a factory, a uniform in service, or a suit to civil work recalibrates notions of femininity and competence. This shift is uneven and contested. Not every woman embraces trousers. Not every community applauds uniforms, but the precedent of practicality and public presence remains. Clothing no longer only signals private beauty. It indexes work, skill, and contribution. Propaganda and advertising shape choices too. Governments encourage thrift, but commercial producers advertise morale through small luxuries. A compact, a lipstick, a scarf. Magazine columns teach refashioning with a patriotic tone. Radio programs popularize styles that can be achieved with minimal fabric. Fashion becomes both civic duty and personal theater. When the war ends, there is hunger and reaction. The immediate post-war years see the rise of appetite for volume and luxury. Christian Lukin, 1947, defines a return to opulence, full skirts, tiny waists, abundant fabric. That reaction underlines how wartime austerity had restrained public taste. Yet the lessons of the war endure an expanded sense of what women could do, which clothes they might wear to do it, and how thrift and invention could coexist with fashion. If you listen closely to wartime wardrobes, you hear a quiet conversation between necessity and desire. The seam that is taken in today may be let out tomorrow. A button saved from an old coat becomes the signature on a new blouse. A scarf folded into a pocket becomes the story of an evening. Dress becomes a social contract. Care for your clothes and care for your community. Mend a neighbor's hem and stitch the neighborhood closer. So, how did women like to dress in World War II? They dressed to be useful, certainly to protect, to work, to serve, but they also dressed to be seen. They married utility with memory, the soldierly line of a suit, the soft roll of hair framing a determined face, a bright mouth that reads as steadiness. They adapted haute couture to coupons, glamour to grit, ingenuity to necessity. They preserved an idea of themselves that war could not fully claim. This is not a fashion catalog, but a portrait of adaptation. A generation learned the economy of elegance. They sewed patriotism into hems, resilience into hairstyles, and inventiveness into scraps. Their clothes were made from thrift and hope, from careful hands that mended and the quiet insistence of those who saved a ribbon for the day peace returned. Their wardrobes tell not only of scarcity, but of courage and of a measured, practical beauty that endured.